Grand Center continues its comeback as St. Louis's premier entertainment district. We'll have that story next on City Corner. I'm Steve Potter, and welcome to City Corner. You know, it doesn't seem like all that long ago that the Fox Theater in Powell Hall was pretty much all that made up what now we call the Grand Center Arts District. But it's continued to blossom, and there's more in the future, and it's a lot of exciting news to talk about. And we want to welcome Vince Schoemehl, former mayor of St. Louis and the current president and CEO of Grand Center, Inc. Vince,
Steve,
welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me here. I really appreciate the opportunity.
It's great, and it must be exciting for you. I think you've been at the helm, I guess, just a little more than 10 years?
Just, it'll be just a little over 10 years now.
How exciting is it to promote something that's so exciting?
Well, actually, a lot of this started when I was in the mayor's office, but it really began with Father Reinert at St. Louis University, who way back in the early 1960s made a decision, along with the board of St. Louis University, that they were going to stay in Midtown St. Louis. They were offered a big piece of land in St. Louis County, and they decided to stay in the city. And Father Reinert made a very important speech in 1964 up in Chicago, talking about the role of the urban university as an engine for social change and urban renewal. And then in 1970, they worked continuously from 64 to 70 to get the city of St. Louis and appropriate authorities arranged in order to create Newtown in Town, which was a 1,200-acre redevelopment program or area that included the Grand Center area now, but also Midtown Medical Center Redevelopment Corporation down around the St. Louis University Medical Campus, and Lafayette Town over around Park and Jefferson. So this whole initiative really began with Father Reinert, St. Louis University, and their vision for reestablishing the whole Midtown area. Grand Center, that portion of the overall Midtown area, had been for decades the center of arts and entertainment. At one time, there were 26 theaters in Grand Center.
This was back like in the late 1800s, right?
Early 20th century, late 19th century, and then up through the 1930s, even through World War II. In fact, a neighbor of mine, about 10 years ago, she's now deceased, but I was at her 80th birthday, and I had just started working at Grand Center. And she said, that's where we went when we heard about VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. She said, everybody just left work and everybody went to Grand Center because that's where the community celebrated. And that's where the movie houses were and the dance halls, and it was the center of St. Louis's social life at that time. And, so we are trying to build on the momentum that Powell Symphony Hall started in the late 60s when they moved there, and then when Leon and Mary Strauss redid the Fox Theater in 1982. And now we've got over 30 arts organizations in Grand Center, and I hope we'll talk about, we've got a lot of redevelopment going on in the neighborhood. It's really a transforming neighborhood, and we hope to make it the centerpiece of an arts and cultural tourism strategy for the entire St. Louis region.
Right. Let's go back. You were talking about in the 1960s when St. Louis University made the decision to stay there. Maybe we should talk about that might not have been an easy decision at that time. I'm guessing there were a lot of people that said you should move away from there. That place is wasteland.
Well, not only was the neighborhood deteriorating, but it wasn't until the last 15 years or so under Father Biondi's leadership that St. Louis University has really had a highly defined campus. You know, if you go back to the 1980s even, St. Louis University didn't own all, and still doesn't own all of the land, unlike the Washington University campus, the Danforth campus, where, you know, from corner to corner, all of that is Washington University's campus.
Right.
The St. Louis University campus was a building here, a building there, and other landowners in between. And so the decision was difficult not only from a standpoint of the surrounding neighborhood having urban challenges, but they were offered a huge parcel of ground, all contiguous out in St. Louis County, where they could have built a completely contiguous new campus. And it took a lot of courage on Father Reinert's part and on the part of the board to say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to stay here. We're going to be the anchor, and we're going to be the engine for urban renewal and for social change in this community. And then, you know, I mean, that was 1964. And, you know, so since then there have been 4 presidents, Father Reinert and Father Fitzgerald, and I'm forgetting one, and then Father Biondi. And Father Biondi's been there now, I guess, almost 25 years. Mm-hmm. And the change that has taken place in the campus, frankly, was unforeseeable in 1964. But the board, Father Reinert, they understood the role of the Catholic University and the urban university. They made the decision to stay here and just had faith that the community and the leadership of the institution would be able to achieve the sort of infrastructure changes that Father Biondi has brought about.
You know, it must be hard in the beginning of any movement like that. I'm thinking of North St. Louis now. You know, in the very initial stages, to get people committed and involved, because people have to believe that it's going to work. And I've been back in St. Louis, we talked about this before, since about 1986. And literally then, I'm pretty sure, it was just Powell Hall and the Fox Theater. So I'm wondering what that process has been like, convincing local landowners or business people to invest, to stay in the area, to invest in it, to believe that it's going to happen. And I mean, it is happening now.
Well, a big piece of it, first of all, was the civic leadership of St. Louis investing in Grand Center as the redevelopment agency for that neighborhood. We bought a lot of historic buildings and had them on the shelf for a long time, paying, you know, the carry costs, the insurance costs, the maintenance costs associated with holding that property for a long time. Right at the corner of Grand and Olive, right now under construction, is the Metropolitan Building, this big white building on the northeast corner. It was built originally in 1904. That building has been vacant for about 43 years on the upper floors. It was, you talk about deteriorated. I mean, it was about to fall down. It's being brought back to life. It'll be low-income housing for 72 working artists, people who are earning their living in the arts, but you know, who aren't famous. They're people that they're musicians and they're visual artists.
Which is most artists.
Which is most artists, that's exactly right. And so finding a way to weave the working artists into the residential infrastructure took a lot of time, took a lot of energy, but we held that building. We, Grand Center, owned that building for about 8 years, and had several $100,000 invested in it, which we did not recover. I mean, we had to give the building essentially to the developer in order to get them to come in and take the risk associated with doing that rehab.
Okay. Let's, before we go to break, let's take a look at a couple of images, and we talked about the cornerstones, I guess would be the way to put it, of Grand Center, which would be Powell Hall and the fabulous Fox. Let's look at the Fox. That, I think 1929, if I've got my date right, I think it opened as a movie theater and was a movie house for most of its life.
And then in 1982, Leon Strauss and Mary Strauss, along with a group of investors that Leon put together, rehabbed it. Now, Leon, you have to understand, he was sort of Father Reinert's consigliere during all of this redevelopment. He was the one really coaching St. Louis University and the people associated with the whole creation of the Newtown In-Town program. And so when it came time to take on the first real rehab project, they turned to Leon. He put some investors together, and they were able to put the Fox back on the market.
And you know, in St. Louis Public Radio, I host an art show, Cityscape, and I talk to a lot of very successful performers that come into town, and they honestly are very impressed with that theater. There aren't a lot of theaters like the Fox left in the United States. A handful.
A handful indeed. In fact, there's sort of almost a replica of this building in Detroit. And other than those two, I don't know of anything that is quite as elaborate and frankly stunning as the Fox.
I always joke, I used to tell Mike Isaacson that I always tell people that it's worth the price of a ticket just to go into the lobby and look around without seeing a show.
And as a matter of fact, at first night, our New Year's Eve celebration, we do exactly that. The Fox just opens the lobby. They don't have a show that night, but they just open the lobby and allow people to come in, and lots of people do. It's it's sort of a sight to behold, and a lot of people just enjoy walking in and admiring the architecture.
And they're continuing to improve. They've just done some things with air conditioning and lighting. Before we go to break, let's take a quick look at Powell Hall, which also had its roots as a movie house originally.
Yeah, Powell Hall was, I think it was 1968 that the Symphony moved there. And you know, that was right at the time that the neighborhood was really beginning to feel the effect of suburbanization. The 60s was when you started to see big multiplex theaters going up in shopping centers in suburban communities. More and more people had cars. It was only 5 years before that we had pulled out the last of the streetcars. So this took a lot of faith and a lot of courage on the part of the Symphony Board of Directors to decide to buy their own building, move there, and take on all the associated risks of that ownership.
Right.
But it's worked out, I think, well for them, and certainly very well for Grand Center and for the city.
It's quite a place. I've gotten to know David Robertson a little bit, the music director. He's a fine person. And the St. Louis Symphony, one of the greatest in the world. No one's going to argue with that.
No, well, as a matter of fact, Fred Bronstein, who's the new president there, when he accepted this job, he was running the Dallas Symphony. They have a bigger endowment, they have a bigger budget, and I flew down to meet him, and I said, why are you taking this job? You know, because it's got a lot of challenges in terms of building its endowment, et cetera. And Fred said, this is the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra we're talking about. You know, this is, this is a world-renowned ensemble, and you know, that's why I'm doing it.
We're going to continue in just a minute. We're talking about Grand Center. We have a lot more to talk about with Vince Schoemehl. We'll do that right after this.
I love your show. I think it's a lot of fun. I love the show. I watch the show every night. You have great guests on there. I enjoy watching the best of the STL.
I love the show, and I love to watch it all the time. Thank you very much.
I just recently started watching the program, and so far I have really enjoyed it. It's wonderful what you do with the kids or anything, and putting St. Louis on the map. Hi, I really like your show. Hi, I love your show. I watch it every day, every time you come on. I love your show.
We may get to enjoy retirement, but our old cell phones shouldn't. Recycle them. It's easy, it's free, and it's good for the environment. Hi, this is Richard Garn. Please answer the call to recycle.
Yo, what up? It's your man Nelly, and you watching STL TV. Experience the loop all day.
In times of peace and times of war, in times of joy and times of pain, we need them, they need us, and we need you. The USO, until everyone comes home.
I'm Steve Potter. Welcome back to City Corner. We're talking about Grand Center with Vince Schoemehl, who's the president and CEO of Grand Center, Inc. And, of course, Mr. Schoemehl, three-term mayor of St. Louis back in the day. I don't know. What do you think? Being president of Grand Center is sort of like the fun of being mayor, but with less headaches?
Well, it's not
Not as many people get mad at you, do they?
Not as many people get mad at you, and it's nowhere near the headaches. Nowhere near the headaches as being mayor.
And you must have a lot of satisfaction. As we said, you've been there about a decade, and you've seen a lot of progress since you've been there.
We have, and I think there's a lot of progress that's really being teed up now. We've got a new building that the University of Missouri St. Louis is putting in. That's going to be the new home of KWMU, St. Louis Public Radio. And there are a number of projects. I mentioned the Metropolitan Building earlier. The plans for the Missouri Theater building are to convert it into a Hyatt Place hotel. The Sun Theater should become the theater for the Grand Center Arts Academy. And those last two projects we hope to get under construction this year yet.
Yeah, of course, a lot of theaters, museums, galleries, now more restaurants. You mentioned St. Louis Public Radio, where I happen to work. It's going to be a media center, too. Right next door, there's the 9 Network, which also has space in it for the Beacon, and HEC TV plus KDHX Radio is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood.
KDHX Radio is moving in right next door to Grand Center's offices on Washington Avenue, and and they'll have their own performance venue there as well. And you mentioned the number of theaters. There are 12 visual arts institutions, museums and galleries in Grand Center, but there are 12,000 theater seats between Lindell and Powell Hall. That is 1,600 linear feet. That's more density of theater space than any place I know of in the country, and probably any place in the world. And we keep adding to it, not in big ways, but when KDHX moves in, they'll have a music venue that'll have about 150 seats. Jazz at the Bistro is located there, right up the street from where KDHX is going to have their music venue. They have 152 seats right now. They're going to do an expansion that'll take that to about 250. So we keep adding, but not the mega structures. We're filling in with the smaller, more intimate structures, such as at the Kransberg Arts Center.
Yeah, and at St. Louis Public Radio, where I work, and our building is going to be done sometime this year, we're going to have some sort of theater space, not to see live shows necessarily, but say, for example, on Cityscape, if we have a musical guest in, we might be able to have 100 or more people to come in and watch the show live and have them perform. So it's really exciting. Let's talk a little bit about what you call the tourism strategy, because Grand Center is not only just a great place for St. Louisans to be able to go to recreate and enjoy, but it's also going to become a huge selling point for the city, which will benefit other venues in the city and other locations.
Well, you know, this was the original vision going back to 1981, and it's somewhat amusing to go back and read the press reports from 81, 82, 83, and the surprise that people expressed about the idea of cultural tourism as an economic strategy. Even New York in the very early 80s really hadn't embraced the whole I love New York, the Big Apple idea. They really hadn't even embraced it in New York yet. Yet it was there, and we were seeing some of it with the Fox. People would come into town to see a Tony Bennett show or a special presentation. Bob Hope was a big headliner back then. And people would come in and stay at a hotel and come see the show. Since the early 80s, the concept of cultural tourism has really evolved, and it's a well understood term within culture, within the cultural community and within the tourism industry. So we are hoping that over the course of the next 3 to 5 years that we can really develop a cultural tourism platform for the St. Louis region using Grand Center as sort of the centerpiece of that strategy. You know, people go to New York, they want to go to Times Square, but they don't spend their entire visit in Times Square. They go to a lot of different places, a lot of different museums. They spend money in a lot of different places in New York City. And we think that, and the same thing in Chicago. You know, I know a lot of people, including my family, take a trip up to Chicago every couple of years and, you know, go to the Field Museum and go to the Second City and whatnot. You're not just in one place, but you know, the idea of marketing a community as a cultural destination means a lot. It gives you a hook around which to kind of organize your argument. And that's where we're hoping, as we complete these redevelopment projects, we're beginning now to organize and move into our marketing program, which will be to sell Grand Center and St. Louis as a cultural destination.
I see it happening. So someone might come be attracted to Grand Center, but they eat at a restaurant in Clayton, maybe stay in a hotel downtown, maybe go watch the Eagles in Alton, Illinois, for that matter. Who knows?
Right, and you know, they're going to have a very nice blues club downtown. We got a great jazz venue at Jazz at the Bistro, and you know, when you go to Chicago, you know, last time I was there, I stayed downtown, caught a show downtown, and then you jump in a cab and you go out to Halsted Street to catch Second City. Yeah. I mean, you use the entire city, but it's useful to have a platform. It's useful to have a hook, and that's where I think Grand Center can play an important part.
Let's take a look at some more pictures. We have some of the buildings that may be completed, may not, in Grand Center. And it's all in this book that Grand Center, Inc. has put out. I know this is available to people if they're interested, and we'll have some contact information come up at the end of the program. But Vince, if you would just tell us, these are pictures from the book, and you just mentioned Jazz at the Bistro. There it is.
This is Jazz at the Bistro, and they're preparing an expansion that will give them more pre-event space and more seating. They're hoping to get that kicked off this year, and I think be finished by about this time next year.
And one thing I think neat about this is their building sign, because you have a lot of neat, the Fox has a new one, Pal Hall, and that's really important, those outdoor, I'm not using the right term.
Well, they're called blade signs, technically, because they kind of look like blades. And this is an example. That sign was paid for by Centene Corporation as a donation to Grand Center. The Powell Hall sign was paid for by Centene Center and the Taylor Family Trust. And we're working on other similar blade signs to, you know, we took that on as an assignment at Grand Center, Inc. to give the community the flavor that there was going to be more life and more light.
It adds excitement. Just as you drive down and you see those signs flashing. These next two images to the museums, we'll begin with the Pulitzer, then look at the contemporary. Great additions to Grand Center.
Well, and they're, you know, these would be great additions to any city in the world, and they happen to be located right next to one another. Tadao Ando was the architect, world-renowned architect that did the Pulitzer, and then the contemporary, which is located right next door to it. I don't know if you have an image on that. Do you have an image? Yeah,
there we go.
This was done by an architect named Brad Klopfel, and we were fortunate in that we caught Brad right at the beginning of a dramatic rise in his career. He's very well-known architect now. That building has been open going on 10 years now. And we caught him right at the beginning of the rise of his career. These are real, not only in terms of their artistic expression in Grand Center are they important, but also in terms of their architectural expression.
Right. We just have a few minutes left. Let's run through as many of these pictures from the book as we can before we run out of time, because they're so interesting. The next is the Grandel Theater, which a lot of people know is home to the Black Rupp.
Home to the Black Rupp and St. Louis Shakespeare, and built in, I believe, 1884 and renovated in 1990. Richard Gaddis. This was Richard Gaddis's first major project at Grand Center.
The next one, this is not an arts organization, but this is a good example of something else that we'll find in Grand Center. Big Brothers, Big Sisters.
Yeah, well, Big Brothers Big Sisters is in the lower right-hand corner of that picture. That was the old Woolworth building, and Grand Center bought that building, held it for about 5 years. Big Brothers Big Sisters is located there, as is the Kranzberg Arts Center. So in the old Woolworth building, the Kranzberg Arts Center has two theaters. Studio theater seats about 80 folks, is used mostly for musical presentations. And then there's a black box theater that seats about 80 people. The main feature in that photo is the Continental building, and that was redone by Steve Trampy, opened about almost 10 years ago. And literally, when that building was rehabbed, there were trees growing out of just about half the windows.
Right.
It was in really decrepit shape, and it's now really a centerpiece of the architecture in Grand Center.
Let's take a look at one more quick one for just a few seconds if we can. Grand Center Arts Academy, which is one of several other schools that are there.
Right. There are 4 schools in the neighborhood: Grand Center Arts Academy, Clyde Miller Career Academy, Cardinal Ritter, and Loyola. And so we right now have just about 2,000 students in the neighborhood, and we'll have 2,500 when the Grand Center Arts Academy is completely built out. They're 6th through 8th now, and they'll go 6th through 12.
Well, Ben Schoemehl, it's really exciting what's happening. We'll have some contact information coming up, and I guess there are ways people can get involved if they want to help, right?
Sure, absolutely. info@grandcenter.org, and if you'd like a copy of the book, just send us an email, and we'll send a copy of the book out. And if you'd like to volunteer in one of our many activities, we'd love to have people. Great.
It's a great book. I highly recommend it. And Vince Schoemehl, thank you for your time, for being here. Continued success. It's a great project, great area, and I'm excited about it.
Well, Steve, thank you very much.
Ben Schoemehl. I'm Steve Potter. That's all the time we have for City Corner today. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.